Hello, welcome back, and as always, I hope you're doing well. Right, before I start today, guys, I want to let you know, and I should have asked Steve this when I had my chat with him last week in the room. A lot of people have asked me about the lanyards and the gift pack that's been sent out prior to the event, the Brucelee event in London, and the gift packs will be sent out about 6 to 8 weeks before the event, so sometime in July I would imagine. So I hope that answers your question. The more this event goes on, I'm getting a little bit more excited about it. And Steve's co-author on his books that he's put out, you know, Mandarin Superstar, Intercepting Fist and Brucelee Dragon, Darren Chewer, is coming to the event. So I'm really looking forward to meeting Darren. I might have to take one of my books up and get him to scribble on it for me. But as it's getting closer to the thing and moving forward, I've got to admit, I'm really getting excited about this. Today's video, a good friend of the channel, Cole Playford, all right buddy, suggested a few weeks ago that I sit down and had a chat with Brandon Bentley. You know, Brandon Bentley that done the Game of Death Integral, he worked on the Arrow box set, he done video essays, he's done work on Criterion, he's done work on Shout Factory, as well as loads of other movies. I think he's in the industry. Great guy. Well, Sunday, like I told you, I sat down for a couple of hours and had a chat with Brandon, and it was tons of fun. I really had a good time talking to him. Alas, I recorded it on Zoom. I've got to find a better way of doing it. I was trying to figure out the best way. I wanted the side-by-side recording, but the only problem with that is when you blow up their video, the quality's not that great. But I actually was tampering with it, and I'd done what they call voice recording. So when I'm talking, I was full screen, and when Brandon was talking, he was full screen, which is fine, but I've got to figure out a better way of doing these internet conversations, because I'm really not impressed with the video quality that Zoom produces. I mean, the camera that I had on me, my webcam, looked absolutely awful. Luckily, I was recording myself on a separate camera, so it looked okay. But if any of you know a better alternative than Zoom, let me know in the comments down below. I do want to get better at it. But you can hear everything fine, the picture quality is okay, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the chat. Now, it was a 2-hour conversation, so like I did with John Little, I'm going to break it into 2 parts. So I want to go out tonight, Tuesday, hopefully, and part 2 will go out on Thursday. Anyway, that's enough of me going on about it. So, I hope you enjoy this. I'm pretty sure you will. So without any further ado, enjoy my chat with the awesome Brandon Bentley. Welcome to the Rambles. I've known about you for quite some time, obviously, being a Bruce Lee fan, the Game of Death Integral.
That's bust up with the Be Water shirt. It
kind of gives it away, yeah, it does. Yeah. One of the fans gave me this, and I end up finding out on the internet it was you that made it.
Yep.
Interesting thing. So, how did that come about? What made you do it, and how long ago was it?
So, I remember exactly when it was. It was summer 2004 when I finished this.
Wow.
Yeah, that is over 20 years old. And so, I think, if I remember correctly, I think you actually found a quote I had online where I said, there's so much I would do differently with it, both, you know, creatively, on a technical scale, because the thing is, if anyone watches it, it looks rough. Because, in my opinion, at least, as someone who's very OCD with audio, video, especially with a lot of Blu-rays and 4Ks I work on nowadays, I have to be very OCD about it.
Yes.
But the funny thing is, like, I took the video from, it was the IVL Hong Kong DVD of Game of Death was like the base for the 78 footage.
Wow.
Because that was right before Fox released those remasters here in the US. Because I think it was actually South Korea that got them first in 2003, and then Hong Kong through IVL put out the 4-star restorations, and then we got them in 2005 through Fox. But I already had the Hong Kong version, so one of the first things I did was I wanted to work on, you know, a as long as possible version of Game of Death. That was before I learned the longest versions of films aren't always going to be the best. So it was almost like the kitchen sink version where it's like, if I could squeeze it in, I'm going to squeeze it in.
And so you did.
Yeah, probably more than I should have, because I think the runtime's like 2 hours and 10 minutes, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's long. It is long.
It's funny, too, because virtually all the footage I was working with between the old Fortune Star restoration, the Brucelee and GOD footage, the greenhouse fight from the Hong Kong Legends DVD, all of it was interlaced in some shape or form.
Right.
The Hong Kong Legends footage of the greenhouse fight was okay because you can sometimes get away with de-interlacing PAL 25 frames per second footage a lot more fluidly than trying to convert 29.97 interlaced footage back to 24, because a lot of the software back then wasn't as good at converting like that.
Gotcha.
So I didn't even bother with that at the time, which is why there are some scenes where if I try to zoom in on something, especially during the Brucelee and GOD footage, it gets a little clunky. It gets a little, you see a lot of interlacing artifacts. So that's one of the major things I would fix. On top of that, I probably would not use everything if I did it again now. Because the other thing is, for years I've been talking about going back to this, but I want to wait until we actually had the best possible quality of everything. And we kind of do now. Like we do. Yeah, we have the 78 footage in 4K. We have the greenhouse fight in at least HD. We have the original 72 footage in HD as well. So, yeah.
And we've got the final game of depth with all the outtakes and everything.
Exactly. So I could go back and do that. And if I wanted to try to use more of the footage where you would originally see James Tien and Get Yun in the background, if I can actually like sort of do like, not CG per se, but like careful erasing, but also like motion tracked in After Effects. So if I want to like replicate the pagoda background walls to like cover up when Bruce is like doing the dance around Dan and Asanto, I could probably pull that off. But we'll see. If I only had the time to do it like I did 20 years ago.
I gather you are quite a busy guy.
A little bit.
Yeah, I gathered that from the emails, mate, but that's cool. Talking of Game of Death, did you hear about Mel Novak in the week?
Yeah. He was working till the very end.
Got to give it to him, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the Game of Death Integral, I mean, I've had a few people saying, is there any chance they can purchase a copy? Well, obviously, knowing the copyright laws and all of this stuff,
Yeah,
I was just lucky. I'd not even heard of it, to be honest with you, until a subscriber sent me this. And I was fat, so I'd done a video on it on the channel, obviously.
It's one of those things where it's like, if you're buying a copy, you're doing it wrong, because it's definitely meant to be just a fan project to be kind of like traded among friends. There's one other one that didn't really get as much traction, and it's something else I would want to redo as well. I made it around the same time. I think it was like a year later. It was called The Big Boss Redux, in which it's nothing super fancy. It was really more of like a music edit of the film, where I just kind of like took random music from other movies and plopped it in, almost ironically enough, kind of like the recalled copy of A Better Tomorrow. Because the funny thing with A Better Tomorrow, for those who don't know, is that I don't know if it was the Megastar disc, but I remember it was at least the very first Anchor Bay DVD here in the US that had a 5.1 mix that was just taking music from various movies, like Speed, for example. I think Terminator 2, maybe. It was just like taking all these other movie music cues that they didn't have the rights to. I'm like, that's going to be a problem, guys. But so I just did it as like a fan thing. But that is one I want to do again years later. Mainly, like what I've had an idea for now, if I ever revisited the Big Boss Redux, would be to finally incorporate some of the Mandarin cut footage. Not all of it, but probably like maybe half of it. But the music that really stuck with me was actually Brian Tyler's score for the fourth Rambo. Like a lot of that has the vibe of the Big Boss in a way. And the funny thing is, like, the fourth Rambo was actually filmed in Thailand. So
of course, it
kind of makes sense. Like, okay, so that tracks.
Yeah, I can get that.
Yeah. So
I mean, the soundtracks is something I've dug quite into, but we'll get to that in a little while. You know,
there's a lot.
There's a lot. And Golden Harvest, I mean, it shocked me. They got music from everywhere. Ennio Morricone, you name it. Like I said, I discovered an Elton John song in Fist of Fury.
Yep.
Who
Fist
knew?
of Fury, for years, I thought Joseph Koo did more original music for it than he actually did. Like, the theme obviously is his. Like, that's definitely his at the end of the day. Even the Big Boss, the funny thing with that was, I haven't been able to confirm this yet, unfortunately. It's one of the few things that's kind of slipped my grasp, is whether or not there was another re-release of the film in Hong Kong years before the Cantonese version. Like, I think I can't find evidence for it yet, but I feel like there might have been a Mandarin re-release, maybe around the time of Bruce's passing, in which that's when they first brought in Joseph Koo to do his music for it. That would later end up in the Japanese version and parts of the Cantonese version. I could be wrong. It's just a theory. Because one of the things that leaps to mind is, like, why would they have hired Joseph Koo to do music for the Japanese version? Like, that never sit right with me to begin with. It's like they could have, but I don't know. That just seems like something they really wouldn't have done. But on top of that, you also have the Mandarin language version of To Be a Man, where it's like, all right, they probably wouldn't have used that in the Japanese cut, though I could be wrong. Because there are some versions that have the Japanese ending where you do hear like the slower version of To Be a Man, but with Mandarin lyrics. So it gets very confusing after a while. It's like, all right, who produced what when? Like, trying to find evidence on that has been making me rip my hair out.
It is really, mate, tell me about it. I've been doing it, and it is, you've really got to dig into the weeds. And I mean, I did the Fist of Fury one, was really taxing for me. It was so difficult because you use your Shazam app or Google to listen to. It finds nothing. It just says no results.
Sometimes you get lucky, but not always. There's another, I can't remember the name of the plugin, but there's one I have on Chrome that I use sometimes. And sometimes it works, and other times it'll find something that someone just like got a fake light,
sampled it or whatever and done a rap over the top. I've had that for myself. Yeah,
a lot. It happens a lot.
Yeah, it does indeed. So, talking of Game of Death, the 78 version, right? Yes. I mean, since I think A Warrior's Journey and all that lot, it's kind of a guilty pleasure with me. I kind of hate it and I kind of love it. It's I've got the strangest relationship. I mean, when I watch it now, it's kind of awful, but there are still bits I do quite like about it. What do you think Bruce Lee would have made of the 78 version?
Tough. That's one of those things where that's a major what if, because it's like, because the funny thing is, I know there are talks about what was that Ho Chung Tao film, like before he actually became Bruce Lee, that apparently was made while Bruce was still alive, that recently got a release from TerrorVision. I think it was like Enter the Panther or something like that. And it's one of those things where it's like, would Bruce have actually been made aware of that before he passed? Because the closest we got to anything like that was like Fist of Unicorn, which of course Bruce was assisting Unicorn with. And then of course, you know, he was aware of like, oh, someone way in the back just zoomed in with their camera while I'm on set. Not cool. So it's one of those things where it's like, I'm trying to think of a modern example where like someone left the project still alive, obviously, and then the film was still finished, like what they did about that. Like, I don't know if Bruce would have tried to, you know, slap a suit on Golden Harvest and then made his way off to Shaw Brothers or what. Yeah. We've seen so many photos of Bruce on the Shaw Brothers lot, including during the filming of Enter the Dragon with John Saxon by his side. So it's like, this could have gone either way. Like, they could have already tried to do something with the 72 footage while he was still alive. Yeah. And he went somewhere else. So it's a major what if, but knowing Bruce, I don't know. Let's not forget that apparently, like his first three films, you know, before Enter the Dragon, and when I say first three, I know there's the giant asterisk of the childhood films, because like to this day I still have the bad habit of calling The Big Boss his first movie. I'm like, well, his first martial arts film.
I get you. I think we all do that.
The Orphan or The Kid or My Son Ah Chung or any of those, which I would love to see a proper restoration of those films, a collection, because those have kind of sporadically crept out through like VCDs and things like that over the years.
100%, all remastered. Can you imagine what a box set?
Oh yeah, yeah. But trying to find good film elements for 50s era Hong Kong films is
slim pickings.
Even trickier than the 70s films, which we know can already be tricky depending on the movies. But I can go off on all the tangents. But no, it's funny because people forget that Bruce knew that these films were made primarily for the Hong Kong fans of the Hong Kong market.
100%.
And like allegedly they were prepping The Big Boss to be exported, and he was not happy about that from what I had read, which is fair. And I think that was part of the reason why we got a different dub as well. Like, it's never been like 100% confirmed who had the final say on just striking down the original export dub for The Big Boss, if Bruce had a say on that, if National General Pictures in the US was like, let's see if we can do something with this. I'm sure there's more evidence somewhere that I've completely missed, but it's a little tricky because, Fist of Fury, they're just like, get it out. we're going to keep the dub as is. We're good to go. Just get it out.
Yeah.
And of course, by the time we got to Way of the Dragon, released here after his passing as Return of the Dragon, same thing. They just kept it as is. And it's funny too, because I feel like Barry High, who actually did his voice, Bruce's voice in Way of the Dragon, doesn't get enough credit for his fake Bruce Lee yells. I think his were actually some of the better fake ones out there, in my opinion. But that's a whole.
There's some bad ones out there as well, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention his name since I know he's still around. But
I hear you. I hear you. I do hear you. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, do you think he would have? There's a lot of debate about this.
Yes.
After Enter the Dragon and the success. I mean, obviously, we know Bruce passed away.
Yeah.
Do you think he might have returned to the game of death, or do you think he would have ended up? I asked John Little this when I spoke to him. Or do you reckon he would have gone to the States because he would have got offered so much?
It's tricky because, a lot of the rumors about his last days revolve around meetings about game of death.
Yeah.
So I feel like he, at the very least, out of obligation, would have finished what he had started, because I don't think he was going to leave that just hanging out there. And he knew he had more creative control over that than he would have in the US with his films there. Because the thing I heard about Enter the Dragon, as that was technically a Concord co-production, a lot of the still missing footage from Enter the Dragon is stuff that Bruce was kind of shooting on his own. Like a lot of the extra dialogue between, Lee and Mei Ling was apparently stuff that I think he was going to film, hoping to get it into the American release, but then realizing, okay, well, if they don't put it in, we'll just put it into the Hong Kong cut. Not too dissimilar to what Jackie Chan would do years later with The Protector. Unfortunately, a lot of that didn't make it back in. Like, all we really got, of course, was the monk scene at the beginning of the film, which, of course, Robert Klaus was a part of. Like, we see behind-the-scenes photos of him on set. But I think they already knew it wasn't going to make it into the U.S. version, initially at least. So that made it into the Hong Kong version. And then, of course, the follow-up in the Hall of Mirrors. So I feel like those might have been more Bruce pushing for that rather than what would have been intended for the American release. But I do feel like he definitely would have been pushing more for American projects, knowing that that was his end game, but still trying to get creative control, I think, would have been the trickier part. I mean, granted, with the success of Enter the Dragon, they most likely, hopefully, would have given him more of a chance to actually, like, hey, let's actually listen to him, because obviously he knows what he's doing, but, early 70s Hollywood.
I know, it is a really... But, I mean, it was so successful. I mean, literally, Enter the Dragon changed the world.
Yeah.
And I think Bruce would have just had a blank check. Do what you want to do,
Oh, no. One would have. That would have been amazing.
Yeah. So it does make you wonder if he'd have gone back to it or not. I often think about this one because, obviously, like you said, on that very last day of Bruce Lee's life, he was going to go and meet Raymond and, obviously, James Bond.
That's a big...
and so that was in the notes. So you've worked on Bruce Lee projects... if I'm correct here, Shout Factory, Criterion, yes, and Arrow?
Yes.
Wow, that's impressive.
The trifecta. And it's so funny how it started. The first project I ever worked on was the 2013 set from Shout Factory, their very first Bruce Lee set. And that was kind of just dumb luck, because in the Blu-ray.com forums, they were trying to find more audio sources. So I kind of just went, I might be able to help. So, because, back then and even today, trying to get specific audio sources from the licensors can be hit or miss. Like, sometimes we get lucky and like, oh, this is perfect, this is amazing. And sometimes we'll get audio sources where they try to get ahead of the curve and restore audio, and it just is not good. Or you get like a remix that has new sound effects, and it's just like, nope, let me see what else we can do instead. So I did a lot of the early audio on that set. Did like a little bit of extra features. Like I did, the very first video essay I ever did was actually Bruce Lee versus Peter Thomas. That was the name of the video essay, in which my voiceover was very like 70s Anchorman. It was very over the top. I'm like, why am I talking like this? It's like, so when they did the score here, they did that instead. I'm like, why am I talking like this? And I still kind of fall into that sometimes. I try not to, but and the funny thing is, all that really was, and I gave the credit at the end too, I was basically reading this small essay that was actually on the vinyl release of the Peter Thomas score that talked about how he got involved, because a lot of people forget that the score was actually first made for the German release of the film. Die Todesfaust des Cheng Li, I believe is how it's pronounced. And somehow it made its way into most of the other Western releases of the film. with the French release being one of the few exceptions. The French release is one of the few that actually kept the Wong Fu Ling. We won't say the Wong Fu Ling score, but the mix, what he oversaw.
That's the perfect way of saying it. The mix.
Yeah, exactly, because of all the different scores that he was using. But yeah, that's why when you watch the German version, the Italian version, I believe the Spanish version, there's actually a little more of the Peter Thomas music in there, namely at the riverside scene at the end of the film. It actually plays throughout the entire sequence, not just fading in at the very end of the scene. So I feel a longer version of it. And also there's music when the first two cousins are killed, which I think is actually the same music that plays when Tony Liu's character is harassing Maria Yi's character, Chow Mei, by the riverside. So I think it's the same music. It's just being used when the cousins are, stabbed and chopped up and all that, rather than being completely silent. But yeah, so even with the same scores, you can have different variations of it. So it's never ending. But yeah, so the Shout Factory set was the first one I worked on. And I joke with people that I was actually responsible for a last minute change on there, because unfortunately at the time, even though there were already like proper HD masters of the first three films, not so much Game of Death. Game of Death took a while before we got a proper HD release. All of them were upscaled masters, which is weird, because I thought, all right, well, we already have a proper HD of Big Boss, Fist-Fearing Way of the Dragon. Not sure what happened here. And they were already doing additional color work on these older masters. I'm like, we can't use these. So I actually had the Hong Kong Blu-ray, the original, the very first Hong Kong Blu-ray of the Big Boss, and I showed them comparisons. Like, you can see, it was like the close-up shot of Bruce's eyes. It's like, this is not the same. Like, we're losing detail. So we had to do like a last-minute change to get the proper HD masters on there. And it's funny because I did that set. I thought that was like my one and done Blu-ray work that I'd ever do.
You opened up a can of worms, mate.
Yeah, I did. For better or for worse, most times better. Funny enough, it was 3 years later, I got an email from Cliff McMillan, who was the head of acquisitions at the time, and who ironically enough is now at Arrow. And he was saying, hey, we still have the rights to the Bruce Lee films, and now they've been restored in 4K. Would you like to work on these again? And if there's anything you want to add, I'm like, all right, sure. And funny enough, that was just on a whim when I asked, like, for the hell of it. Probably going to get turned down, but why not? Can I do a commentary for The Big Boss? It's my favorite movie. If they say no, fine. But if they say yes, hey, give it a shot. Sure. And so I literally just recorded that in my old home office in my last townhouse with a lavalier mic. And I was just winging it. Like, I had, like, notes.
Of course.
But nothing like what I do nowadays whenever I do a commentary now. Although it's been about a year and a half, 2 years since I last did a commentary, they can be a bit much. I'm no Frank Jang. Frank Jang can just churn out commentaries like this. He's amazing. Like, the amount I can do in 1 year, I feel like he does in a month. So, and I finally got to meet him recently too. We had a long chat about all these projects.
Oh, no, he seems like a right nice guy. Knows his stuff.
Absolutely, he was great to chat with, and he and I just bounced off. And it was great that we basically, when I got to do the Arrow set, like, he and I were basically rubbing elbows on that too, because he and Michael Worth worked on the Way the Dragon commentary.
Yes, that's right.
And it was funny because
you done one on Way of the Dragon on that as well, didn't you?
Yes. Well, that was the funny thing, because for the Criterion release, we basically just ported over the Big Boss commentary from Shout. And the funny thing is, like, I think more people started to hear it when I was on the Criterion set. And so, like, 4 years after I recorded, suddenly I'm getting comments on, like, oh, yeah, I loved your commentary. I heard in the Criterion set. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah. But yeah, so for Arrow, I knew, like, James Flower, who I cannot praise enough for his work on the Bruce Lee set. In fact, anytime someone compliments me, I'm like, if it wasn't for James, the stuff I did work on directly wouldn't be on there at all. And, the other stuff, like finding the missing footage, that was all him.
That was a revelation and a half, like the log scene and the Big Boss. And the set stands, I mean, I've got a lot of Bruce Lee box sets and DVDs and Blu-rays, etc. But that stands towers above all the rest. Yeah, and I mean, I thought Criterion was going to be a hard one to follow, but this just leaps and bounds. And the way they packaged it and put it together, it's an absolute beaut, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people talk about Enter the Dragon. We know it's the 40th anniversary of Enter the Dragon. And I got to admit, if Warner Brothers would have gave Arrow the big okay to work on it, that would have been a masterpiece. And I'm hoping at some point down the road, Warner Brothers may, because they're a little bit sloppy with their work, and I think there's so much more they could do with it.
I was pleasantly surprised, though, when Warner Brothers did their own 4K, that, first of all, they finally gave the options for both cuts. Because it seemed like once we hit the 25th anniversary, that was it. That's the only cut you get. Which, don't get me wrong, great that we finally got that footage, which it's so funny to think that technically Hong Kong already had that footage for 25 years.
I know.
And we finally got it. But then that was like the only cut that you could see. Like that's all that was on DVD and then Blu-ray. So then when they finally did the 4K, they're like, hey, we're going to put both cuts on here. And what's really cool is that when you actually watch the 25th anniversary cut in mono, they actually finally brought in some of Bruce's original recording for the monk scene. So it's only on the 5.1 mix where it's John Little's voice. You still get a little bit of his voice for the parts that were still missing on the mono track, but even Warner Brothers finally brought in some of Bruce's real voice. So it's still probably, like, at least with the presentation of the film itself, the 4K is the best, but extras, they were sorely lacking, and that's kind of been a thing with Warner Brothers.
This is an issue I have a lot of the times with Warner Brothers. Come on.
Yeah. It's like you have all this stuff. I'm pretty sure it's under your own license. So unless I'm missing something here, why is it not there? So,
well, I spoke to John Little about this, and I said about the Henry Wong footage that was apparently recorded, etc. And John said it would have been worth someone paying someone minimum wage to just go through their archives, just wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But then again, look what Arrow discovered with the Big Boss and the Game of Deaths. So you just think it's just probably under a canister somewhere.
Not far off. I mean, that was the strangest thing with both of them, really. Both of them were almost just happy accidents. Like, I've told the story a few times where basically the first one they found was the Game of Death footage. Because even Criterion was trying to figure out who actually had the rights to Brucelee and GOD at this point. Because apparently Artport's not a thing anymore.
No, yeah.
And like, all right, so who actually had those film elements? Because people forget Brucelee and GOD played theatrically in Japan, like on an actual film print.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, that would have been at the time the best bet to find it in actual like film source footage. Because Warrior's Journey, the problem with Warrior's Journey was that their source was the PAL Digibeta source that was not converted to NTSC or 24 frames or 23.976. So they're literally making an NTSC edit from a 25 frame per second source without changing the frame rate. So even if you try to de-interlace Warrior's Journey back, since the cuts change based on where the interlacing was, and it's just, I'm going to confuse myself in a minute. It's that.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
It's that garbled. I mean, the editing itself was great, but like the source they were working with was the best they could have without having access to the film elements. But that being said, when Arrow got involved and they were just looking over the sources for the 78 cut, that's when, of all people, L'Imagine Ritrovata said, oh, hey, we're actually sitting on inner positives of all this other footage, not realizing it was the 72 footage. And we're like, I'm sorry, what? Which is already a big deal in and of itself. And so they send everything over, and then that's when James realized, oh shit, this actually has the log scene and the outdoor footage. And they were just sitting on it. I'm like, all right. It's like, imagine if that happened with the Big Boss footage. Oh, wait. So the funny thing was, I think I was first given the heads up on the Game of Death footage. It was like March or April of 2022. So basically a little over a year before the set came out. Because the original plan was to get it out by the end of 2022. And then it was June that I got the email from James saying, oh, by the way, we were sent a Mandarin language digibeta of the Big Boss, and it has most of the missing footage in it. I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
I'll bet.
And it was another case of it was just being sat on, because I think my theory at the very least was that all they saw was, okay, so Big Boss, Mandarin language, whatever. They didn't think anything of it. They probably thought it was the same re-release cut, but with Mandarin on it. And they didn't think anything about it, despite the fact that the runtime was 105 minutes PAL speed, which is like, All right, well, that's just the movie and no trailer or anything afterwards. That would be about 110 minutes, or at least 109. And the funny thing is, if you watch the raw scan on the era release, it is about like 108, 109 minutes because of damaged footage that was cut out. Like even the regular stuff. Like if you see the final kill of the boss himself, that's actually cut in the raw scan, because you see the shot of the blood coming down, and then it cuts to the stare down shot that we're used to in the American version. So that was one of those things where it's like, all right, was that a print damage issue, or did they actually originally censor that final kill and then they put it back in for the Cantonese version, but didn't put anything else back in other than that? So it's one of those things where it's like, we don't have the notes, so we don't know. And funny enough, I saw in your recent video when you were talking about the Saw scene showing that contact sheet, because there are a few other shots in there that I would love to see fully, blown up, in full, because there's a few little connecting fibers in there as well. So,
you picked up on it. I know you said that in our email. Yeah. That was courtesy of Steve Kerridge, actually. He seems to have tons of great stuff. And also, I found out doing that video, there's about another 3. I know it's only frames. Yeah. It is a bit geeky, but there was more in the international cut than the Mandarin, believe it or not, of the saw coming down.
Yeah, I think part of that might have been because of compensating the cuts on both ends. So they kind of had to like go over a little bit. Like that's one thing I've noticed too, whenever I'm working on audio tracks for restored versions of films. Like if you get like a proper mono source from somewhere, suddenly whenever there would be a real change, you're losing like frames on both ends. I think by censoring that shot, it lost some of the frames on both ends just to kind of like get it together to make sure it didn't overlap.
Gotcha.
And that's one of those things too, where people still theorize, including myself, when that was cut. Like, all right, was it cut after the censor saw it? Was it cut after the initial premiere? Because the thing is, like, they met the 110-minute, not really deadline, but like the cutoff point, and then they realized, oh, this is actually making a lot of money. We need to make it shorter so we can get more show times, and that's how we ended up with the 99-minute cut that we knew for years. And that's why like literal seconds of footage would be cut from scenes, whether it was a little bit of dialogue between Chang and Shu Chen right before they fight the bouncers at the casino, or if it's when the factory manager is talking to Chen and Wong. There's actually literal seconds cut from that if you watch the original version versus the mainstream cut. So like literally they were down to the line. That's why I think people mistook when they find Ashan's dead body with the blood all over when Bruce comes back to the house. They thought that was like a censorship thing because like, oh, it lingered on the body too long. I'm thinking, I think that was just because the shot lingered too long in general. They just were trying to find more seconds.
Trim it down for time, yeah.
Literally to get it under 100 minutes. Because you'll notice a lot of Hong Kong films in the 70s and 80s, 9 times out of 10 are like between 90 and 100 minutes. Because it was like an unwritten rule. Like even some that we thankfully have had in their uncut form, like Drunken Master and 36 Chamber of Shaolin, went through the same thing. That's why, for example, with the Drunken Master, for years, especially in the Western releases on DVD and the US Blu-ray, there were jumps in the Cantonese audio where suddenly they would just put English in there instead, because that Cantonese audio was sourced from the cut re-release version of Drunken Master, which people forget was a thing. Like I actually have that version on a really rough VHS somewhere, which of course cuts out the entire opening fight with Hung Jingli and Sunny Yun, Yun Chun Yi, and just starts with, it actually starts with a different opening text for Drunken Master, where it's Beggar So opening the book for the first time, and then you see the Doi Kun logo pop up, and then and then it just cuts right to Wong Qiying having his students training, and that's why there's no Cantonese audio on a lot of the releases until like the Eureka Blu-ray in the UK, because it was based on the cut version. And funny enough, when James Flowers was working on Shawscope Volume 2 with the 36 Chamber Shaolin trilogy, they realized when they were restoring the original 36 Chamber, it was the same thing. That film was cut down to get more show times. And most people, including myself, didn't even know this until after the fact. So there were a lot of films that went through that. It was just lucky that by that point, these films getting exported into other territories was becoming more common, and thus they could find more film elements. While The Big Boss, the weird thing with The Big Boss is that if you see like a raw version of the rejected dub, there's still little extensions in the dialogue. Not like full Mandarin cut, but you'll notice like some of those bits in the Mandarin cut have the export dub because of that. Because they lingered. So there were like so many different cuts before we landed on, weirdly enough, that early 80s Cantonese re-release being like the final cut used worldwide now. So, but yeah, there's so many rabbit holes with these.
With the Big Boss especially. I mean, I literally, before I watched your Not Quite the Biggest Boss video essay, which I love, by the way, but do you think any of them bits will be discovered now? Because I often have, I put out, people say on the channel, in the comments, they've seen the saw in the head scene. Right? I've explained it to them about the Mandela effect.
Yes.
Right? Because I do honestly believe it is that, because why hasn't it surfaced? And honestly, these people, honestly, I don't disbelieve them. I believe they have seen it. But whether they've seen it,
I believe that they believe they've seen it. So
yes.
Like I don't think it's a case that they're lying. I think it's that they're misremembering. Because look at it this way. The best example of something that was disproven, the flaming cart. We finally got the cart scene. It's not flaming.
It's not on fire.
And it's 2 carts, too, on top of that. Literally just 2 guys running down, charging with these carts, and then running off. Yeah. Nothing's on flames. So it is one of those things where people are like, oh, yeah, no, I seen it. I know I've seen it. It's like, are you sure? Because the thing is, with the remaining missing footage, that was my motivation to do Not Quite Biggest Boss, was it's like, all right, this might be the longest cut we get, but let's talk about what's still missing in the unlikely but hopeful event that somehow it's still found. Because I don't think any of that footage ever made it out of Hong Kong. I mean, even what we got from the Mandarin cut technically didn't until recently. Well, aside from the 1979 Brucelee convention in the UK.
In the UK, yeah.
That was like the big source of where a lot of the memories came from. But I'm not sure, because the thing is, one of the other examples I bring up a lot is Eastern Condors. That one's quite infamous for having a lot of missing footage. And Sammo himself even implied that it might have just been tossed. Like, if that's from 1986. We're talking about a movie from 1971. It was that footage might not have even made it past the premiere at best. Like, it seemed like they had the last minute trims, and then they got out the 110-minute cut and then trimmed that down even further.
They stick some of it in the trailers, though, like one of the bodies in the ice and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that's even weirder, too, because... Once again, rabbit holes. Because you have the one like more mainstream Mandarin trailer that has like 3 of the additional bits in it, which was the scene with Chang walking awkwardly by Nor Miao, the drink stand girl.
Yeah.
You have the scene with Xu Chen talking about the fight with the cousins, and then of course the final visit to the brothel. Those were the 3 that were in the export trailer. Actually, the Hong Kong trailer and some of the international trailers, I should say. But then there was the 8mm trailer, of course, which had Xu Chen's head wound and then the other head in the ice. And that was the weird thing. I think I mentioned it in Not Quite Biggest Boss, is that we got the head wound back, but the other head...
With a little bit more in it as well, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, why was one still there, but the other wasn't? I'm missing something here. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, what was cut when over time between, you know, the viewership with the censors and the theater owners, all the way up to the first export releases of the film. Like, there's so many times where it seemed like they kept going back, probably because it was such a moneymaker that more eyes were on it. Like, how do we, oh God, I didn't know so many people were going to see this. How do we get this whittled down to being just right now? Yeah. And it's funny because, you know, Fist of Fury was probably the one that kind of went the most unscathed, which is funny because that's like 106, 107 minutes.
Yeah, it's quite a long one.
I'm shocked that was never like whittled down further. Like the Japanese version, I think, was cut to like 95 minutes, maybe 100 minutes. It's been a while since I watched that one. But most cuts of the film are just that same cut. Way of the Dragon, on the other hand, was like 99 minutes down to like 90 by the time it got to the US.
We got it into the 80s in the UK because of the nunchaku ban.
Oh, yeah.
It was, honestly, I didn't get to see the nunchaku scene in Way of the Dragon until the 93, I think, when Reservoir Dogs come out. I remember that being, I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah. You can imagine all them years. I mean, I started on my Bruce Lee journey pretty much in the early 80s, with the birth of VHS. I was a bit too young for before that. But yeah, we didn't get to see it for years. It was diabolical. But Fist of Fury, believe it or not, got through the censors unscathed. On the original Rank video, the nunchaku scenes, both of them was in there.
What was it, a priest, sir?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was. Because the BBFC clamped right down. I mean, they butchered Enter the Dragon in the end. Way of the Dragon was the worst. Yeah. I mean, they're 15s now.
There's nothing left.
I know. But they butchered. By the mid-90s, Way of the Dragon, you couldn't really watch it and enjoy it. They butchered it. Thank God. After I can't remember, James Furman left the BBFC. I think he got fired, actually. Someone new came in, and all of a sudden, Hong Kong Legends came out. And bang, we was getting them fully uncut, and it was like, wow. Yeah. But obviously not the big boss. Not the big
like even back then, like I was in high school when the Hong Kong Legends DVDs were coming out, and I remember seeing online the trailer for the big boss. It said completely uncut. I'm like, is it though? Is it though? It's like, comparatively speaking, yes.
Yeah.
But like uncensored?
I mean, I would love to see the full big boss, but I don't. Seriously, after all these years, I think probably the Mandarin print is as good as it's going to get, to be honest. It's still, it's amazing we've got that.
Yes. I mean, going back to your initial question, what's funny is one of the other photos I saw creep out, and once again, like a very low quality, and it's probably one Steve Carriage has, is the next door brothel scene, where, because that was one where even I was skeptical that scene even existed. Where like, oh, apparently, you know, Bruce and this nameless prostitute are just making so much noise that, you know, the other prostitute who was wearing the pink dress in the other scene is like trying to listen in because the guy she's with is just boring her. So I'm like, I doubt that scene exists. And then I saw this really low quality image pop up. I'm like, all right, because I saw that picture after I made Not Quite Biggest Boss. I'm like,
oh, right, gotcha.
Because I actually, like, if you watch Not Quite Biggest Boss, I'm doing like the full Always Sunny in Philadelphia fans would say the Pepe Sylvia board, trying to like pin down like if the scene was real or not, because like of the picture of that one actress in the pink dress with the hair looking a little kerfuffle,
a little bit disheveled,
and then like standing next to Bruce, who has like the like trimmed down look, because like the funny thing is, if you watch a scene where he's like nude at the end of the bed, he basically just like kind of pulled the pants down a little bit, because we see the shot where he like jumps on top of her, you see the sash that he's still wearing, funny enough. And it looked like it was the back of the bungalows that they stayed in, but also filmed the bedroom shots, because the brothel, while it was a real brothel, the bedrooms were not where they filmed, because you'll notice that like 9 times out of 10, they're not actually opening the doors. You hear the sound effect. Because so they basically would jump from the real brothel to the hotel or the bungalows. So I think that's what happened. Like there's too many dots being connected. And then sure enough, when that picture came out, I'm like, well, there we go. So, and that's the thing, like to this day, like we still see more pictures kind of creeping out over the years. Like just when you think you've seen everything, another picture comes out. Like I think we'll see more pictures, probably not more footage. So I could be wrong. Stranger things have happened, but you know, you look at something like, the jitterbug dance from Wizard of Oz, you know, and that's even further back. We never saw that come back. But on the other hand, Metropolis from Germany, that had footage missing for like 80 years, and then they found it. So I won't say impossible, but it's just more improbable. Like even before we found the Mandarin cut footage, I knew that some of these scenes were probably still going to be missing. Like the one I was more surprised that still wasn't there, but then made sense the more I thought about it, was the complete cutting up of the cousins. Like the only thing that actually came back, which is still shocking that they actually brought this back in, was the severed head being tossed into the box. Like, okay, so that happened, because I remember one person a long time ago online said, like, oh, there's a shot where, you know, one of the workers kicks a head into the box. And it's like, that was another case where I think they misremembered. It was actually the manager himself just like looking at the head and then chucking it in there. I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about. But as I mentioned in Not Quite Biggest Boss, in some of the Mandarin mono tracks, you do hear one of the other, you know, the foreman make like a grunting noise, like, like they got hit with blood or something. So it's, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, there could be photos of that. But I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, you could say, well, we'll just have to wait and see, even though the movie's already over half a century old at this point.
I know.
But yeah, you know.
But it is wild. I mean, these photos of Bruce Lee, I mean, of a time when we didn't have phones and camera phones, it amazes me. These photos just keep popping up.
Thousands.
It's unreal, isn't it? Of that time. It is incredible.
Yeah, you know, well before the days of digital photography where you just keep snapping away, because I also do photography. it's funny because when I started on film, and typically you had like 24 or 36 exposures on a roll, and that's it. You got to reset, reload, and it's just amazing. Like when you see like, oh yeah, there was a photographer on set, you realize just how much they're shooting, even if there's like so many photos that you still don't see. It's funny because when I looked at that contact sheet that you posted, it's funny because you can actually see the ones circled that became like the more iconic photos, like the shot with Brucelee versus Tony Liu, which is one of the shots used on the lobby cards as well. And you just see it circled, like, yep, that's one of the ones they selected, obviously, because that's what you have, like the contact sheet. You're like, well, I like this one, cross that one out. Because even in my photography class, we actually made our own contact sheets just like that. You literally would just put all the strips together and then put it over top of a piece of photo paper, then have the light hit it, and then you would take a look at it later on, and then like, oh, I like this one, I don't like that one. Let me try this one. But no, it's just really cool because looking at that saw in the head contact sheet, we've seen like 3 of the photos. I know there was the one that Steve Carriage released a couple years back where it was that same like 45-degree angle shot that we've seen on the Mexican lobby card. That was the first time I ever saw it. But like you actually see Bruce putting his hand on the fist to like push it down further, which is why I still have the theory that like, oh no, he's just leaving that saw in his head at that point.
I think you're probably right. I just enjoyed
the animation.
Yeah, I did enjoy that too. That's why I stuck it in there. But yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
Whether we'll ever see
it ain't coming back out at this point. It's stuck.
It got stuck, yeah, for sure.
Just lodged right in his head.
It's kind of cool. So do you think Fortune Star would have anything left in their archives, do you think? Because obviously I think they've give you everything, but it does seem weird to me, that behind the scenes stuff.
It's tricky because weirdly enough, some of my discoveries working on some of these is actually whenever we get, and I should have asked for this when we did The Big Boss, and I didn't even think about it at the time, is they'll sometimes send over like PDF files of the subtitles, like the way that they were printed directly onto the film. So you'll see the Chinese subtitles, English subtitles. And there have been times where I've actually discovered deleted dialogue from films. Like I first did a video essay on this with Man Called Tiger with Jimmy Wong Yu, which ironically enough was sort of like the low way retaliatory film while Bruce was working on Way of the Dragon.
It was, I know.
Why you have so many Bruce Lee co-stars from Big Boss of Fist of Fury, and then Bruce needed to start getting all these other people for Way of the Dragon. But yeah, there are all these extra bits of dialogue missing from even the longer cut of the film that we had. So it's like, all right, that's interesting. And there's another title I'm working on right now. Can't quite reveal it yet. Same things already happened where it's a film where we know that footage was cut multiple times, much like The Big Boss, but some of those missing dialogue lines are on the subtitle sheet. And I don't know if I could bug James Flower and go like, hey, so we're working on that Bruce Lee set. Did they send over PDFs of the subtitles for The Big Boss? With my luck, it's probably just going to be what lines up with the Mandarin cut. But still, it would be pretty interesting for that. But funny enough, it was the Hong Kong Film Archive that came through with the Big Boss footage because they had the actual theatrical print still sitting in there. Because originally, when they found the digibeta, they thought, all right, well, this is all we can find, so be it. But let's see if by some slim chance they actually still have the film reels that were used to make that digibeta. So then Fortune Star got in contact with the Hong Kong Film Association, and they're like, oh, hey, we actually do still have all these. And then that's when they did the scan. And funny enough, like it matched to the frame, like right down to all the same exact print damage. So it was definitely the same film source being used. And that's the other thing too, is like, with the Game of Death footage, we got lucky because it was an interpositive, which is basically like second generation from the original camera negative, which you can still get a lot of good quality for like color manipulation and the resolution. I mean, OCN, original camera negative, would be great, but interpositive is like your second best bet. Big Boss, it was a release print, like literally something got played in a theater, which is like fourth generation, because typically it's original camera negative, interpositive, internegative, and then release print. That being said, like, one thing I would love to see is like an interpositive found for this footage, but I'm not going to hold my breath because we got lucky that we found this. So even if we find the discovered footage in better quality, that'd be great. But all the stuff that's still missing, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, all right, well, if they were going to show a print to theater owners and the censors, they still would have to go through the multi-generation process typically to get there. So you would think that there would have been an inner positive or an inner negative of a longer cut still looking about. But as some have said, could have been tossed out because like, oh, well, we already use this for the censors and the theater owners. We don't need to keep this. We need more room for new movies, which, you know.
I've heard that about Hong Kong. They're not really one for archiving their stuff like that. It's like onto the next,
then, at least
onto the next. Yeah,
which is ironic because now we have the Hong Kong Film Archive, which has come through with a lot of great things. So it's tricky. And the funny thing is, we've had instances where we get films restored and they're longer cuts, and it was just an accident. Like, oh, I didn't know we had a longer cut of this movie, or I knew of a longer cut, but I didn't know it was that long. Like Operation Condor, Armor of God 2. Like that was another one where I knew of the Japanese cut of the film, which was longer than the Hong Kong cut. But then suddenly when they worked on the Blu-ray, it was even longer than the Japanese cut. I'm like, where'd this come from?
Yeah.
But they actually like had the original film elements on top of that. So it's one of those things where it's like, we don't know. It's almost always a happy accident. Like sometimes when we're asking for certain cuts, they can't be found. And then suddenly like, oh, by the way, we had this, 2-hour cut of Police Story 2. It's like, isn't that the Japanese cut? Which it kind of was. It was slightly different. Although now we've joked about the fact that much like the 25th anniversary of Enter the Dragon, that longer cut of Police Story 2 is the one that's always out when a lot of people just want to watch the Hong Kong cut again. So it's one of those things where it's just like, how many cuts of all these movies can there be? It's almost like even George Lucas would be like, wow, take it down a notch.
Yeah, it is a minefield. It is absolutely a minefield. But I do think with the Arrow set, the way they put it all together with the different versions, that was a lot of work involved. And
Arrow's amazing at that, and they're doing the same thing basically with like the Man with No Name trilogy now, the Knowledge trilogy, because they're doing that with the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yes, I'm going to end up getting those. I think it's going to be a must.
The end all be all. I did a little bit of work on that. I did a trailer reconstruction for a few dollars more because they couldn't find a good scan of the US theatrical trailer. So they're like, hey, I know you've done some theatrical trailer reconstructions in the past. You think you can do one? Oh yeah, sure. Which is funny because when I used to do them years ago, I think I first did them probably for the 2016 Big Boss and Fist of Fury Blu-rays from Shout. I used to just like leave the restored footage as is. So it's like, oh, it's a remastered trailer. But then I realized over time, well, when it comes to the trailers, people sometimes like to look like they literally had a film reel transferred of that original trailer. Because
I'm one of those.
Yeah, it looks more nostalgic, more retro, more authentic.
Definitely the retro feel, yeah.
Yeah, so now whenever I do try to reconstruct those trailers, I try to get them closer to looking like a proper film scan. And I've kind of brought it down to a science, so much so that one of my ego-boosting days was when I got an email from Dave McKenzie from Fidelity in Motion, who, by the way, anytime you have a Blu-ray 4K with like stellar seamless branching, including the Brucelee set from Arrow, it's 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100 going to be Dave McKenzie. The guy's a magician. He was also the one behind my mad scientist idea of the 88 Films release of Righting Wrongs, where we did like a hybrid cut and like multiple cuts and multiple endings. Like if it wasn't for him, I would not have been able to have done that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he emailed me once asking me like how I was doing my trailer replications. And I was like, it's really just like filters that I've kind of fine-tuned over the years, like color LUTs, getting the grain just right, getting it just soft enough, bit of I always say the word wrong. I think it's a telecine, because they used to say telecine, like telecine wobble to make it look like it was actually going through like an actual projector. And yeah, I mean, obviously the best case scenario is finding the proper film elements to
of course.
Those trailers. But now I try to get it as close as I can. Getting the one giveaway always is if you put the text on screen and it looks too sharp. And it also doesn't blend in with everything, like the grains on the film footage, but not the text. And so there's all these little OCD things that I use to actually like replicate these trailers. I did a few on Shellscope Volume 3 as well for it was the US TV spots for New One-Armed Swordsman, Triple Irons, as it was called here. So I did the same thing for a few dollars more.
Nice.
But
I'm looking forward to them coming out. I am. I'm really looking forward to those.
It was funny because I thought it was going to be a box set because I was aware of these being worked on. Then suddenly they were announcing all of them separately. I'm like, that's fair. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly I know needed the most work. So for very technical reasons, it was, I think, the the Technoscope process and how the restoration process was. But like, I honestly feel like the Arrow releases of the Dollars trilogy is going to be like the end all be all. And I'm not. I might be biased, but let's not forget I work for like 42 different companies. So I'm just saying, on an unbiased level, I would say that was going to be the end all be all.
100%. That they do. I mean, watching Fist of Fury, the Arrow version, it could have been made last year. The quality, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
So what they done on that was phenomenal. Do you think I often get asked this a lot. I've got a list of questions from the subscribers for you as well. We'll get through as many as we can. There's a trailer with Bobby Baker and Brucelee, apparently, in the Jewell school. Has anyone ever seen it? Obviously, we've seen the photograph of them two butted up together. I've never seen it. Apparently, it was going to come out on the Hong Kong Legends, but it never did.
So it's funny because there have been a few photos from that. Like the most famous one, obviously, is the one you mentioned where they're like shoulder to shoulder. There's a couple of Bruce on the stairway, like the one with him screaming, like getting ready to jump down and attack. And I think that, first of all, it was a teaser trailer that was most likely attached to the Big Boss. Because I think, if I remember correctly, I think I saw like one newspaper ad scanned online of the Big Boss still in theaters. And there's something at the bottom mentioning Jing Wuman. Like I saw the Chinese title for Fist of Fury. So my guess is they're trying to get people to come back even more by saying, hey, now if you see the movie, you'll see like a little teaser for his next movie. So I think that was the intent. I think it was meant to be attached to the Big Boss. That being said, I don't know if that teaser's still out there. It could be, but that's the thing. Like finding very specific trailers like that has become more of a chore in and of itself. Like even just trying to find film elements now for the Big Boss trailer has become tricky. Like there's one online, I think it's actually patched into the Arrow version too, where like it was print damage beyond belief. Like I've seen some print damage on film sources, but holy shit, this was rough. And more people even knew about that one, and we've seen that one. So for this teaser trailer to be like lurking out there somewhere, I think we could still find that, but trailers are trickier, I think. Because, that's one of those things where it's like, hey, played in theaters. It, was advertising the next film that already got
another movie. Yeah.
Why keep it? Why do we keep this? And it's unfortunate that there's that mindset, but it's funny too, because like for more modern teaser trailers that were thought to be lost, like there was one for The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy that people talked about where it's being set up like this big fantasy adventure epic. And then suddenly you see Eddie Murphy in the snow, just complaining about how cold it is and everything, which is actually a reference to one of the scenes in the movie itself. But it was one especially shot for the teaser trailer because, like, it's literally all original footage, nothing in the movie itself. Which I love those kinds of teaser trailers.
Me too.
Short films, and that was like a rumor for years. And then suddenly there's a YouTube channel, and I'm blanking on their name. I feel bad. Where they actually scanned 35 millimeter trailers, and they actually found that teaser.
Wow.
So it's one of those things where it's like, theater operators of theaters that close down and stuff like that might hold on to stuff because, either the distributors want the stuff back or they're like, oh, we don't need that. You can keep it. So, and then those, theater owners, theater employees, they would either keep them or toss them themselves. So,
I hear you. And you'd think they'd maybe make their way onto a platform as big as YouTube. You'd think they would. There is a lot on there. Teasers
for Hong Kong films are even harder to find than trailers. I feel like there's a title I'm working on. Funny enough, it's the same one that I mentioned earlier that I can't talk about quite yet. Where they found the teaser for that film, which I didn't even know existed. But it's a different situation. But I also don't want to give it away because it'll also like give more clues of what it is. But it's like, I didn't know there was a teaser. All right, that's interesting. So yeah, that's one of those things where it's like until someone does a deep dive into the archive, it's kind of hard to tell because the thing with the Hong Kong Film Archive is multiple studios have their elements there. Like I've heard them reference for the Golden Harvest films, for the Shaw Brothers films, and now, the Golden Princess films. So there's a lot in the Hong Kong Film Archives.
Yeah.
So, and even so, like there's another thing that they put out recently. It was at some presentation where I think it was a teaser, like a pseudo teaser attached to, I won't say Police Story. I could be wrong. but it was Jackie Chan, like after he was recuperating from his near-death accident of Armor of God, talking about how he's gonna come back and make Armor of God, and so it was sort of like a pseudo teaser trailer thing, and it was only shown at the Hong Kong Film Archives like the last year or so. Wow. So even things like that, like we didn't know existed. So it's entirely possible it's still somewhere in there,
gathering dust.
Yeah, but when you're trying to find like a 1 or 2 minute strip of film. Not impossible, but
it's a needle in a haystack, isn't it?
I was going to say the exact same thing. It's a celluloid needle in a haystack.